I was halfway through unpacking my daughter's backpack when I saw it. A crumpled piece of lined paper shoved between her math book and a half-eaten granola bar. I pulled it out without thinking. At first, I thought it was just a forgotten homework assignment. Then I read it. Who celebrates kids with dead dads? My throat closed. My hands went numb. I read it again, hoping it would change. It didn't. It was written in blocky pencil-pressed letters like a child trying to be cruel on purpose. There were tiny tears at the corners, like someone had balled it up, then flattened it to make sure it got seen. I stared at it, standing in the middle of our quiet kitchen, holding that awful sentence in my hands. And suddenly I could see her, my daughter, Emery, sitting alone at school. I pictured her clutching her little pink backpack, the one with the cupcake keychain she picked out last month, trying to look brave. It was her birthday. She had spent all week talking about it. She made little invitation cards herself with glitter pens and stickers. She handed them out in class with a shy smile, saying, "You don't have to bring presents. Just come for cupcakes and silly hats." She was so proud. She even helped me frost the cupcakes the night before. I told her it would be special, that people would come, that birthdays are still worth celebrating. But when I walked into her classroom that afternoon, she was sitting alone at the party table. 12 cupcakes untouched, confetti untouched, Emery untouched. She didn't even cry. She just looked at me with those big, quiet eyes that used to light up when she saw her dad walk through the door. I didn't ask her what happened. Couldn't. I was too afraid of the answer. So I packed the leftover cupcakes, kissed the top of her head, and told her we'd celebrate at home. Just us. I didn't know about the note then. I didn't know that, while she sat alone, someone had decided to make it worse. That while my daughter waited for her friends, someone made sure she felt smaller than she already did. I pressed the note flat against the counter. My fingers shook as I tried to hold it still. I didn't know who wrote it. I didn't know who saw it. But someone made my little girl feel like her father's death made her unworthy of kindness. And that's when something shifted in me. Grief is a heavy thing. It bends your back, it fogs your brain, but most days you keep going. You pack the lunches, you smile through the meetings, you say you're fine when you're not. But this was different. This wasn't just about grief. This was about cruelty. This was about a child trying to stand tall in a world that had already taken so much from her. And someone had decided to knock her back down. I looked out the kitchen window at the street where my husband used to teach her how to ride her bike, where he used to wave to the neighbors on his way to deployment, where she used to sit on his shoulders to watch the 4th of July fireworks. He wasn't just a soldier. He was her world. He still is. And now someone made her feel like that world didn't matter. So I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I reached out, not to a teacher, not to a principal. I reached out to someone who knew Caleb, someone who had stood beside him in uniform, someone who might understand that birthdays still matter. Because when your child is sitting alone on her birthday, when she's been told she doesn't deserve to be celebrated because her dad is dead, you don't stay quiet. You find a way to show her she still belongs. Even if that means calling in the only people left who remember her father the way she does. The morning of Emery's birthday started like most days in our house, early, rushed, and a little too quiet. I was up before the sun, packing her lunch and checking my work emails on my phone while coffee brewed. Emery sat at the kitchen table in her pajamas, slowly peeling the wrapper off a blueberry muffin but not eating it. She kept glancing at the cupcake container next to her backpack, where 12 carefully frosted treats waited for the classroom celebration. Chocolate with pink sprinkles, her favorite. "You sure you want to carry them yourself?" I asked, pouring her orange juice. She nodded, eyes still on the cupcakes. I got it. I watched her searching for a flicker of birthday excitement. Emery used to bounce off the walls on her birthday, waking us up at 5 in the morning to sing her own birthday song and count how many people might hug her that day. That changed after Caleb died. Her birthdays became quieter. Not sad, just smaller, like she was afraid to take up too much space. She finally looked at me. "Do you think they'll like them?" "Of course they will," I said. "You helped make them perfect." She didn't smile. She just nodded again and slipped off the stool. I bent down to help her with her shoes. As I tied the laces, I noticed she had clipped her dad's dog tags to the inside of her backpack. She always kept them close, but on special days, field trips, holidays, birthdays, she made sure they were with her. I touched the tag gently. Dad would have brought the big glitter balloons, I said. She nodded again, this time with a half smile. He used to make the whole class sing twice. I laughed quietly. He did. Loudly. We stood there for a second, both of us holding that moment between us like we were trying to keep him in the room. Then I kissed her forehead and helped her lift the cupcakes. On the drive to school, the sun came up soft and golden. I told her about the little surprise I'd packed in her lunch, one of those silly fortune fish and a tiny note that said, "You are magic." She didn't say much, but I caught her reading it again before she got out of the car. At drop-off, I watched her walk through the school gates with the cupcakes balanced in her arms. Her backpack looked heavy, her steps too slow for an 8-year-old on her birthday. Still, I told myself it would be fine. Kids get quiet as they grow. Grief changes them, but it doesn't erase joy. I had to believe that. After work, I picked up a small cake for just the two of us. Nothing fancy, just chocolate with blue icing. Caleb's favorite. Emery always said it made her feel like he was still at the table. I was even thinking about making her laugh by wearing the ridiculous birthday hat Caleb used to insist we all wear. I arrived at the school a few minutes early and waited by the office. The hallways were empty except for a janitor sweeping glitter into a dustpan. I smiled at the thought that maybe it came from Emery's party. Maybe they had fun. When the final bell rang, I walked toward her classroom. As I approached, I slowed down. The door was open and I could see inside. Emery was sitting alone at the back table. The same 12 cupcakes sat there, untouched. One was missing, probably hers. The balloons I gave her were still tied to her chair, drooping now. Her teacher stood by her desk, quietly collecting papers, avoiding eye contact with me. I stepped inside, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, birthday girl." Emery looked up and smiled, small and unsure. "Hi, Mommy." I knelt beside her, brushing her hair behind her ear. "No one came?" I asked gently. She shrugged. Maybe they forgot. Her voice was flat, not bitter, not angry, just tired. That was the worst part. Not the cupcakes sitting there like a joke, not the empty chairs, not the decorations that never got touched. It was that she had already started explaining it away. She had already learned how to protect other people's feelings before her own. I stood up slowly, feeling a tightness in my chest that I hadn't felt since the funeral. Her teacher walked over looking embarrassed. I'm really sorry. I thought some of them would come. Emery passed out invites last week, and some of the kids said they were excited." I didn't respond. I just nodded and started gathering the cupcakes. As we walked to the car, Emery held my hand without saying a word, and I told myself we'd try again next year. I told myself she'd forget. But later that night, when I found the note, I realized she never had a chance to. After Emery went to bed that night, I sat on the floor in the laundry room and cried. Not the quiet kind of crying you can hide, the kind that comes from deep in your chest, where everything you've held back finally breaks free. I muffled it in a towel so she wouldn't hear. I didn't want her to feel like she had to comfort me on her own birthday. I had kept it together in front of her. I smiled through dinner, let her pick the movie, even sang happy birthday with the small cake I bought. I watched her blow out the candle without making a wish. She just stared at the flame for a moment, then puffed it out with a tiny breath and said, "Thanks, Mommy." Then she cleaned her plate and went to brush her teeth, like it was any other day. Once she was asleep, I started unpacking her school bag. That's when I found the note. It was folded into a tight square, shoved into the outer pocket. At first, I thought it was a scrap of paper she doodled on, maybe something she forgot to turn in. But when I opened it, the words hit me like a punch to the chest. "Who celebrates kids with dead dads?" My hands shook. I read it again. I turned it over, hoping for context, hoping for something to make it feel less cruel. But it was just that one sentence. Sharp. Final. Meant to hurt. I sat down at the table, staring at the note under the kitchen light. I wanted to believe it wasn't serious. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. Maybe some cruel joke between kids who didn't understand the weight of what they were saying. But Emery understood. She carried the weight of those words all day. She sat alone while every other child ignored her, and she still came home and smiled at me. She still said thank you. The part that broke me wasn't just that she had been hurt. It was that she didn't tell me. She didn't want to make it worse. She was already learning to shrink her pain so other people wouldn't feel uncomfortable. I called my mother, trying to steady my voice. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, sweetheart, how's my birthday girl?" "She's sleeping," I said. "No one came." There was silence on the other end. "No one?" she asked, her voice lower now. "Not one," I said. "And someone left her this." I read her the note. I could hear her breath catch. "Jesus," she whispered. "Do you know who wrote it?" "Number and I don't care. I care that she saw it. I care that she thought it was about her. She's just a child, Grace. She's my child. And today she felt like she didn't matter because her dad is gone." I hung up the phone and sat in the dark. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't fix it with a school email or a classroom talk. I couldn't erase the memory of her sitting alone or the sound of her saying, "Maybe they just forgot." Caleb would have known what to do. He always had a way of making Emery feel seen. He used to dance around the kitchen in his uniform on his way out the door just to make her laugh. He made her feel safe even when the world didn't. I couldn't fill that space. I had tried. I brought the cupcakes. I tied the balloons. I smiled when I was breaking inside. I stood up and looked around the living room. Photos of Caleb lined the shelves. Emery had framed one of him holding her on his shoulders during a Memorial Day picnic. Her handwriting was on the bottom in purple marker. "My hero." I walked over and picked up my phone. There was one name I hadn't called in a long time. Danny Reyes, one of Caleb's closest friends from his unit. They had deployed together twice. After the funeral, Danny had told me, "If Emery ever needs anything at all, you call me. Doesn't matter how many years go by." I typed out a message. "Hey, Danny, it's Grace. I know it's been a while. Emery had a really hard birthday today. No one showed up. She found a note in her bag. I don't know why I'm reaching out. Just thought you'd want to know." I didn't expect a response. It had been 2 years. He probably had his own family, his own life. I put the phone down and went upstairs. But as I pulled the blanket up around Emery, her face lit by the nightlight, I made a quiet promise. I couldn't bring her father back, but I wasn't going to let the world forget him, or her. She deserved to be remembered, to be celebrated, and I would find a way to make sure of it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise so I could pretend to be strong again. Down the hall, Emery slept curled around her stuffed bear, the one her dad bought her at the base gift shop just before his last deployment. The dog tag she wore around her neck clinked softly against the metal bed frame every time she shifted. I couldn't shake the image of her sitting in that classroom. Bright birthday crown on her head, a table full of cupcakes, no one beside her. I kept asking myself what I had missed. Had I ignored a sign? Should I have stayed for the party? Should I have warned her that not all kids are kind? But none of that mattered now. What mattered was what I did next. Just after 2 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I turned it over and saw the name I had almost given up on. Danny Reyes. The message was short. "Say no more. We've got it covered." At first, I didn't know what he meant. I stared at those 5 words, wondering if he just meant to offer comfort or if he was planning something. I didn't ask. I didn't want to interfere. Part of me feared hoping too much. Danny had been Caleb's closest friend in the Army. They trained together, deployed together, survived things I still don't fully understand. After Caleb's funeral, Danny hugged Emery so tight she almost disappeared in his arms. He called her Little Firecracker, just like her dad used to. I hadn't heard from him since the Christmas after Caleb died. But now, in the middle of the night, he answered. I sat at the kitchen table, turning the note from Emery's backpack over and over in my hand. I still didn't know who wrote it, but I realized it didn't matter anymore. The note wasn't about one cruel sentence. It was about what we were going to do with it. The next morning, Emery woke up and padded into the kitchen in her socks. "Do I have to go to school today?" she asked. I shook my head. "Number, we're staying home." She looked relieved, but then her eyes dropped to the table where the folded note still sat. She didn't ask about it, but I could tell she'd seen it. I knelt beside her and took her hands in mine. "Em, what happened yesterday wasn't your fault. None of it. Some people don't know how to be kind, especially when they don't understand someone else's story. But you're not broken, and your dad would be so proud of how strong you are." She didn't speak. She just wrapped her arms around my neck and held on longer than usual. Later that day, I took her to the park. We got ice cream. I let her pick dinner. I didn't bring up the party, the note, or the other kids. I just let her be a child. But all through the day, she kept glancing at me like she was waiting for something. Maybe a question. Maybe a sign that she wasn't as invisible as she felt. After she went to bed, I texted Danny. "Are you sure?" His reply came back fast. "Absolutely, we're family." The next evening, I noticed movement on the front porch. I peeked through the curtains and saw a car pulling up, then another truck behind it. I stepped outside just as the third vehicle stopped at the curb. Doors opened, boots hit the ground. 6 veterans in full dress stood silently in our front yard. They weren't strangers to me. One had shared Thanksgiving at our house. One had helped Caleb move his gear before deployment. One had carried his flag at the funeral. All of them had known my husband not just as a soldier, but as a father and a friend. Each one held something: a birthday cake, a stack of envelopes, balloons, a folded photo of Caleb in uniform, standing with all of them overseas, grinning with his arm slung around Danny's shoulder. I opened the door, unsure what to say. I didn't have to say anything. Danny stepped forward. "We missed the party. We wanted to make it right." Then I heard the soft shuffle of feet behind me. Emery stood barefoot in the doorway, clinging to her bear. Her eyes widened. She whispered barely loud enough for me to hear, "Those are Dad's friends." I turned to her, surprised. "You remember?" She nodded slowly. "From the pictures." Danny knelt down and held out the cake. "Happy birthday, firecracker." Emery's lips parted, then curled into the kind of smile I hadn't seen in months. She stepped forward. I watched her take the cake, the letters, the love. She didn't have to say anything. They knew. They understood. And for the first time in a long while, so did she. They came not with noise, but with purpose. 6 veterans stood at the foot of our porch, lined up like they were still on duty, boots polished, backs straight, arms full of love disguised as birthday gifts. Emery clutched my arm, her eyes locked on them like she couldn't believe they were real. Danny looked up at her and smiled. "We served with your dad," he said. "He told us all about you, said you liked to sing while you brushed your teeth." Her mouth twitched, like she wanted to smile but wasn't sure if she was allowed. I felt her fingers squeeze tighter around mine. "You have his eyes," another vet said softly, "and his quiet stare. He'd talk about you at night when we were out there. Said you were brave, just like your mom." That did it. She took a single step forward, then another. She let go of my hand and moved to stand in front of them. Her eyes were full of something I hadn't seen in so long: recognition, not of faces, but of belonging. Danny pulled a birthday crown from his pocket and gently placed it on her head. "We missed your party," he said, "so we thought we'd throw one of our own." He signaled to someone in the back, and I noticed neighbors starting to gather on their porches. A couple from across the street stepped outside with their toddler. A man next door leaned on his cane and watched, eyes narrowed with interest. And then the music started. It wasn't loud, just a portable speaker playing one of Caleb's favorite oldies, a song he used to dance to in the kitchen with Emery on his shoulders. The veterans started singing Happy Birthday, deep voices carrying through the neighborhood. Not loud, not flashy. Honest, steady, like a promise. Emery's lips parted in disbelief. She turned to look at me as if to ask if this was real. I nodded, but my throat was too tight to speak. When the song ended, Danny handed her a stack of envelopes. "These are from us, letters about your dad, stories we thought you'd like, things he probably never got a chance to tell you." She cradled them like something sacred. Another vet held out the cake, chocolate, blue icing, just like the one Caleb used to pick out every year. A single candle flickered at the center. One of the older men, Sergeant Keller, I remembered now, lit the candle and stepped back. "Go ahead, sweetheart," he said. Emery looked around. She saw the small crowd of neighbors now standing on the sidewalk. Some had brought out lawn chairs. Others stood in silence, watching her like they were seeing her for the first time. She looked at the veterans, her dad's friends standing proud behind the cake. Then she looked at me. "Can I make a wish?" she asked. I nodded. She closed her eyes. Her brow furrowed, lips pressed tight. When she opened them again, she blew out the candle in one breath. Everyone clapped. The applause wasn't loud, but it was enough to let her know she had been seen. After cake, the veterans sat on the porch with Emery. One told her a story about how her dad once lost his boots and had to wear flip-flops around the base for 2 days. Another told her about the time Caleb saved a stray puppy in the middle of a mission and tried to sneak it home. She laughed. Not a quiet chuckle. A real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and free. One of the younger veterans pulled a small charm from his pocket, a pendant Caleb used to wear on his tags, and handed it to her. "Your dad wanted you to have this someday. He told me to give it to you when you were ready." Emery held it tight in her palm. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. I stood behind her, watching the girl who had sat alone in a classroom just 2 days earlier now, surrounded by people who didn't just show up. They saw her. They carried her father's memory. They carried her too. The neighbors started coming forward. One by one, a couple of parents apologized. One mom brought over a tray of cookies. Another offered to help plan something for next year. But none of that mattered as much as the moment already happening. Because this wasn't just about a birthday anymore. It was about identity, about a girl remembering she came from someone brave, someone loved, someone who had family beyond blood. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't forgotten. She was Caleb's daughter. And she was surrounded by proof that he was still here, alive in stories, in loyalty, in love. That night, after the last of the neighbors drifted back to their homes and the porch lights dimmed, Emery sat cross-legged on the living room rug, surrounded by letters. The wrapping paper had been cleared, the cake half-eaten, the balloons tied to chairs like they were waiting for morning. But she wasn't interested in any of that. She was focused on the stories left behind by the people who had known her father best. She opened one letter at a time. Some were short, others several pages long. They told her about her dad's jokes, the way he always carried extra candy in his pocket for kids on base, how he used to write poems in a beat-up notebook no one else was allowed to read. She read them out loud, stumbling over a few words, then reading them again so she got it right. At one point, she looked up and said, "Did you know Dad could play guitar with his eyes closed?" I smiled. "He used to do it to make me laugh. Said it made him feel like a rock star." She nodded seriously. "That's what this guy said, too." She picked up another envelope and pressed it to her chest before opening it. It was from Danny, a handwritten note, full of truth and love. At the end, he had written, "He talked about you every day. He said being your dad was the best thing he ever did. He called you his reason for everything." When she finished reading, she leaned against me and didn't speak. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. She was quiet in the way people are when they feel safe again. Later, as I tucked her into bed, she reached for the small pendant Danny had given her and held it up. "Do you think Daddy would have liked today?" she asked. I sat on the edge of the bed and brushed her hair from her forehead. "I think he would have said this was the best birthday he never got to see." She smiled, then turned to look at the photo of him on her nightstand, the one where he was holding her as a baby, grinning like he had everything in the world. "He didn't miss it," she said softly. "Not really." I turned out the light, but I stayed a moment longer at the door. I wanted to remember her just like that, calm, whole, wrapped in love. And I thought about everything that had happened over the last 2 days, about the note, the silence, the heartbreak, about the people who stayed quiet, about the ones who stepped forward. I thought about how loss isolates, how it convinces you that your pain is something to carry alone. But that night proved something different. It proved that grief does not have to be silent. It proved that kindness still exists in quiet corners and in people you haven't spoken to in years. It reminded me that showing up doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs to be honest. The veterans didn't come with fancy decorations or a big production. They didn't ask for recognition. They came with memories and presence. They came because they remembered Caleb. And through remembering him, they honored Emery. That's what changed everything. They didn't try to fix the pain. They didn't deny it existed. They simply stepped into the space where pain lived and said, "You're not alone in this." And sometimes that's all a child needs. Not answers, not explanations, just someone to say, "We see you. We're here." The next morning, Emery asked if she could bring the letters to school for show and tell. Are you sure? I asked. After what happened? She nodded. I want them to know who my dad was. I want them to know I'm not just the girl with the dead dad. I'm the girl whose dad was a hero. That's when I knew the weight of that note in her backpack had lifted. She wasn't carrying shame anymore. She was carrying legacy, and from that day forward, so was I. Because sometimes the loudest kind of healing doesn't come from the people closest to you. It comes from those who remember your story, who step back into your life not because they have to, but because they choose to. And that kind of love, once it shows up, never really leaves. If this story moved you, even just a little, take a second and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Maybe a parent doing their best. Maybe a child who feels invisible. Maybe someone who's forgotten how much showing up can mean. If you've ever felt the weight of grief, if you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong, I hope you know this. There are still people out there who will stand beside you, who will show up with cake and stories and quiet love when it matters most. Leave a comment below if this reminded you of someone you've lost or someone you'll never stop showing up for. I read every single one and I'd love to hear your story. And if you believe in kindness, in family, in not letting people disappear into silence, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next story. Because around here, we don't just tell stories. We remember people, and that makes all the difference.